Mitch Marner, Leon Draisaitl, Sidney Crosby. Three superstars all entering the final year of their contracts in the NHL. For much more, let's bring in Frankie Corrado. Frankie, all three are eligible for extensions. None of them have signed yet. Let's start with Marner. Last season, he saw his teammate William Nylander play out the final year of his deal. Now, after scoring 54 points in his first 37 games, he signed an extension in January. So are there any benchmarks that Marner needs to hit to get an extension during the upcoming regular season, do you think?
No, there wouldn't be any benchmarks for the regular season. Ultimately, what it comes down to is, does the team have success in the playoffs? That's the reason why the new head coach is here. And listen, the fact that Marner is still in Toronto would lead me to believe that they're going to give this thing another chance with Craig Berube behind the bench to see what he can do with this core group. That includes Mitch Marner. So if he's got 54 points in the first 5 games, it doesn't really matter. There's not an extension coming at that point. You know, Mitch Marner's contract and when it is expiring, the timing of that is different than the timing of Matthews and Nylander's contracts. You know, now we're talking about there's a new general manager, there's a new head coach, and still this team hasn't really been able to get over the hump. Now all of a sudden Marner's contract is up, and if it were to expire and he were to move on, that would be the easiest way to kind of break up the core four. You don't have to make a trade. You try and see if it works again one more year with a different head coach, but there's no benchmarks in the regular season that would indicate there's going to be an extension coming. These players, and Mitch Marner included, have been phenomenal in the regular season. Where success has eluded them is in the playoffs. And if the playoffs are different under head coach Craig Berube, you can still throw a big bag at Mitch Marner and convince him to be a Toronto Maple Leaf for the rest of his career.
Now, Toronto has 4 of the 12 highest cap hits in the league right now with the core 4, to your point, Frankie. And at the very top of that list, of course, is Austin Matthews at $13.25 million. So that brings me now to Leon Draisaitl. Should his next deal eclipse Matthews as the highest paid player in the league?
It absolutely should. And this is the way the league works. Salary cap goes up. Certain players' contracts are expiring, and Leon Draisaitl is going to get a significant raise. His raise starts at 13.25, and then the conversation goes up from there. We're talking about a guy who's a 3-time 50-goal scorer, 5 times in his career has had over 100 points, including the last 3 seasons, and he's been one of the best playoff performers that we've seen in the NHL. So yes, Leon Draisaitl's new deal, because the cap is going up, because of the success he's had in the regular season and the playoffs, absolutely has to eclipse Austin Matthews' 13.25. The question just becomes, how high does it go? How high will the Edmonton Oilers be able to afford it? But really what it comes down to, it looks like the Nathan MacKinnon, Connor McDavid. You know, Connor McDavid signed his deal a little before Nathan MacKinnon's. Nathan MacKinnon's came up. It was 12.6. McDavid was 12.5. Austin Matthews has his deal at 13.25. That's the starting point. The question is just how much higher does Leon Draisaitl's contract go above Austin Matthews?
So Draisaitl may end up as the highest paid, but the player with the highest career earnings in NHL history, of course, is Sidney Crosby. Now, Frankie, I know you can't picture Sid in another jersey. You've made that very clear. But in terms of his legacy, what's the better move for Crosby? Being a Penguin for life or making another cup run with another team?
The better legacy move for Sidney Crosby is to be a Penguin for life and follow in the footsteps of his mentor, Mario Lemieux. Think about this. Stanley Cups were won under Mario Lemieux's watch, and at some point, the torch had to get passed on. The torch got passed to Sidney Crosby. Now, Sidney Crosby has won 3 Stanley Cups in Pittsburgh. Now, that team is in a little bit of a middle spot where they're not quite good enough to compete for a championship, but they're not quite bad enough to really bottom out. At some point, if Sidney Crosby's legacy goes from winning Stanley Cups in Pittsburgh to eventually maybe passing the torch to the next version of Mario and Sid, whoever that may be, we don't know, that will be way more substantial for Sidney Crosby's legacy than saying, hey, I'm out of here, I'm going to go to Colorado or New York, and I'm going to go try and chase one more Stanley Cup for my own sake. Sidney Crosby should be like Mario Lemieux, should be like Nicklas Lidstrom, and play his whole career with the team that drafted him, the team he had a lot of success with, and pass the torch when the time comes.
Now, Crosby is the all-time leader in games played for Pittsburgh. He does rank second among all Penguins in career goals, assists, and points, only behind Mario Lemieux. Frankie, thanks for this.